Each December, gemstones take on a different feel. Under the festive lights, inside gift boxes, they are wrapped with emotion rather than analysis. They are chosen not just for their rarity, they are chosen for their meaning, for what they represent at the end of the year. But January changes the story. As the decorations are taken down and the stories settle, many gemstones begin to feel heavier than expected. Not because there's anything wrong, not because the value disappears, but because the emotion has lifted them away. Today, let's explore 15 holiday gemstones that often feel overpriced in January, not financially, but emotionally. And the number one ranked stone is not rare, not impressive, but it explains this entire list better than any other stone. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Ranked 15th, Blue Topaz, the holiday stone that feels brighter in December than it does in January. In December, blue topaz feels perfectly timed. Its cool blue tones mirror winter skies. Its clarity appears sharper beneath festive lighting. And its reputation as a safe, elegant gift places it among the most commonly chosen gemstones during the holiday season. Blue topaz never demands attention. It offers reassurance instead. That quiet reliability explains its frequent appearance in December jewelry boxes across the United States. January, however, alters the experience. As holiday atmosphere fades, the same stone often feels less striking. Not diminished, but quieter than memory suggests. The gemstone itself has not changed. The setting has. From a geological standpoint, blue topaz is widely available. Significant deposits are found in Brazil, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, and other regions. Most commercial blue coloration is achieved through treatment, an accepted practice that rarely raises questions during the holidays. Once December passes, that detail becomes easier to notice. The conversation subtly shifts. Under Christmas lighting, blue topaz appears crisp and luminous. In ordinary daylight, its appearance often reads as uniform, consistent, predictable, almost intentionally refined. That predictability is not a flaw, but outside the holiday moment, it can feel less engaging. This is why blue topaz frequently enters January discussions as a stone that feels overpriced. Not because it lacks beauty, but because its appeal was elevated by timing rather than rarity. Holiday gifting emphasizes symbolism over analysis. Calm, trust, clarity, balance. Blue topaz fits that language effortlessly. January introduces a different lens. Attention shifts toward evaluation. Would the stone feel as distinctive without the holiday context? Does its appearance evolve across different environments? How many similar examples exist beyond the gift moment? For many, the answers arrive quickly and without drama. Blue topaz remains popular because it was never designed to impress through scarcity. Its role has always been accessibility. That contrast creates a quiet tension. It is among the most gifted gemstones in December, and among the first to be mentally re-examined once January begins. That re-examination does not suggest regret. It signals awareness. Blue topaz is one of the most common holiday gemstones. Hence, the decorations came down. Did blue topaz still feel distinctive, or mainly tied to the moment it was given? As this countdown continues, the contrast between December emotion and January reality will grow sharper. Blue topaz simply introduces the pattern, not as a misstep, but as a reminder of how powerfully timing shapes perception of value. Ranked 14th, Peridot, the summer stone that feels out of season after the holidays. Peridot often enters December wearing the wrong season. Its fresh green color has long been associated with sunlight, warmth, and open landscapes. For centuries, it symbolized renewal, life returning after hardship. And yet, every holiday season, Peridot quietly finds its way into winter gift boxes. In December, that contrast feels intentional. The green appears hopeful, alive, distinct from the muted tones that dominate winter. January is less forgiving. Once holiday symbolism fades, Peridot's seasonal mismatch becomes harder to ignore, and perception begins to shift. Geologically, Peridot forms deep within the Earth's mantle and reaches the surface through volcanic activity. It is one of the few gemstones that occurs in only one color family, giving it a clear identity, while also limiting its visual range. During the holidays, that simplicity feels refreshing. Afterward, it can feel static. Unlike stones that change dramatically under different lighting, Peridot remains visually consistent across environments. Its brightness does not deepen. Its tone does not evolve. That consistency is not a flaw. But outside the holiday context, it often raises a quiet question. Why did the stone feel more compelling just weeks earlier? Holiday gifting elevates symbolism over setting. Green becomes a stand-in for hope, for renewal, for emotional balance during winter. January removes that overlay. What remains is a gemstone many people instinctively associate with summer jewelry, daylight wear, and warm climates, not post-holiday reflection. This is where Peridot begins to feel emotionally overpriced rather than materially so. The stone itself has not changed. Its December appeal depended largely on contrast, not rarity. Once that contrast disappears, practical considerations move forward. The color feels less adaptable to winter wardrobes. The brightness draws attention rather than comfort. The stone feels better suited to a different season. That shift does not create disappointment. It creates recalibration. Peridot's strength has always been honesty. It does not claim rarity. It does not rely on dramatic transformation. And because of that transparency, January reveals the limits of its holiday appeal faster than many other stones. This is why Peridot appears early in the countdown, not as a cautionary tale, but as a clear example of how timing can elevate perception, then quietly reduce it. Peridot is traditionally seen as a summer gemstone, yet it's often gifted in winter. After the holidays ended, did Peridot still feel appropriate? Or did it feel tied mainly to the moment it was given? As the countdown continues, emotional inflation will intensify, and January reality will become sharper. Peridot simply marks the threshold. Ranked 13th, Smoky Quartz, the quiet winter stone that loses its mystery after the holidays. Smoky Quartz never competes for attention. In December, that restraint becomes part of its appeal. Its muted brown and gray tones feel grounded, calm, almost protective. Among bright holiday colors and reflective surfaces, Smoky Quartz stands apart by doing the opposite, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. That subtle withdrawal makes it a natural winter choice. During the holiday season, Smoky Quartz is often framed as a serious stone, one associated with stability, grounding, and emotional weight rather than celebration. In December, that framing feels deliberate, even refined. January changes the experience. Once seasonal atmosphere fades, Smoky Quartz's darkness begins to read less as symbolism and more as surface. From a geological perspective, Smoky Quartz is quartz that has undergone natural irradiation over long periods of time. It occurs widely, including in Brazil, Madagascar, and parts of the United States. Its origin is authentic, but not rare. In December, rarity is rarely the point. Smoky Quartz is selected for tone and mood. January removes the mood. Without candlelight, holiday decor, or seasonal storytelling, the stone often appears visually fixed. Its color remains steady. Its transparency reveals little variation. Its surface offers few evolving details. What once felt quietly powerful can begin to feel fully revealed. This is where Smoky Quartz begins to feel emotionally overpriced, not because it promised too much, but because it depends heavily on atmosphere to sustain interest. As a holiday gift, Smoky Quartz functions as an emotional anchor, a stone chosen to ground, not to impress. Once that emotional context dissolves, attention shifts naturally. The appearance feels familiar rather than engaging. The tone feels resolved rather than deep. The experience feels complete rather than ongoing. That reaction is not disappointment, it is closure. Smoky Quartz does not transform over time. It does not surprise with new character. It does not reveal hidden layers with prolonged attention. Its strength lies in presence, not progression. And when presence is no longer supported by seasonal context, the stone reaches its endpoint quickly. This is why Smoky Quartz appears early in the countdown. Not because it fails, but because it finishes. Smoky quartz is often chosen for calm and grounding, rather than visual impact. After the holidays ended, did smoky quartz still feel engaging? Or did it feel like a stone whose role was already complete? As the countdown continues, the gap between holiday atmosphere and January perception will widen. Smoky quartz simply makes that shift visible, quietly and without illusion. Ranked 12th, Garnet, the holiday stone that carries more tradition than surprise. Garnet arrives in December already carrying centuries of expectation. Its deep red tones align naturally with the holiday season. Warmth, continuity, and tradition. It looks at home beside evergreen branches, candlelight, and heavy winter fabrics. For many, garnet feels familiar before it ever leaves the box. That familiarity is exactly why it becomes a frequent holiday gift. Garnet is rarely chosen to impress. It is chosen to reassure. Historically, garnet has been associated with protection, endurance, and safe return. Ancient travelers carried it not as a luxury, but as a symbol of constancy through long journeys and dark seasons. That symbolism translates effortlessly into December. January alters the reception. Once the holidays pass, garnet's greatest strength, predictability, becomes more visible. From a geological perspective, garnet is not a single stone, but a group of related minerals. Many commercial garnets used in jewelry are widely available, durable, and visually consistent. During the holidays, that consistency feels comforting. Afterward, it can feel settled. Unlike stones that slowly reveal new qualities, garnet often presents itself fully at first glance. Its color remains steady, its structure offers little variation. Its presence feels complete almost immediately. This is where garnet begins to feel emotionally overpriced. Not because it lacks meaning, but because its meaning arrives already formed. Holiday gifting places garnet inside a story that most people recognize instantly. The symbolism is understood before the stone is worn. January shifts attention toward discovery, and garnet offers little left to uncover. That does not weaken its role, it defines it. Garnet is not a stone of curiosity. It is a stone of continuity. Once the holiday context fades, the experience often feels concluded, as if the stone has already delivered everything it was meant to say. That sense of completion can feel underwhelming when expectations were elevated by tradition rather than exploration. This is why garnet appears here in the countdown. It does not provoke regret, it creates resolution. The emotional arc closes quickly. What remains is appreciation, not fascination. That outcome does not signal a poor choice. It reflects a purchase guided by heritage more than discovery. Garnet has long been tied to winter traditions and holiday gifting. After the season passed, did garnet still invite attention? Or did it feel like a story already fully told? As the countdown continues, tradition will give way to stronger emotional amplification and sharper January contrasts. Garnet simply marks the boundary between comfort and curiosity. Ranked 11th, Citrine, the warm stone that loses its glow after winter ends. Citrine enters the holiday season carrying a promise. Its golden yellow tones suggest warmth, optimism, and light, qualities that feel especially powerful during the darkest months of the year. In December, citrine doesn't simply look bright, it feels necessary. Set against winter decor and low seasonal light, citrine stands out immediately. It reflects warmth where warmth feels scarce. It becomes a visual counterweight to cold skies and muted landscapes. That contrast defines its holiday appeal. January changes the equation. As winter settles into routine, citrine's brightness often feels less remarkable, and at times slightly out of place. From a geological perspective, citrine is a variety of quartz, closely related to amethyst. Much of the citrine used in commercial jewelry is heat-treated, producing consistent yellow tones that are visually pleasing but widely reproducible. During the holidays, that uniformity feels reassuring. Afterward, it becomes easier to see. Without festive framing, citrine's color no longer competes with darkness. It competes with ordinary daylight. Under neutral conditions, many stones appear lighter, flatter, and less layered than memory suggests. Citrine is no exception. This is where citrine begins to feel emotionally overpriced. Not because it lacks beauty, but because its strongest impact relied on seasonal contrast rather than depth. Holiday gifting elevates symbolism. Citrine is associated with joy, positivity, and forward momentum, ideas that feel especially compelling at the close of the year. As a gift, it carries optimism for what comes next. January shifts focus away from optimism toward clarity. Once routines return and lighting normalizes, the experience often resolves quickly. Citrine reveals its full character almost immediately. There is little variation to unfold over time. That immediacy can feel satisfying in December. In January, it can feel finished. This is why citrine appears at this point in the countdown. It does not mislead, it does not disappoint, it delivers its message all at once. And stones that reveal everything immediately often feel less engaging once the moment that elevated them has passed. That outcome does not diminish citrine's place. It highlights how strongly timing shapes perception. Citrine is often chosen to bring warmth and positivity during winter. Once January arrived, did citrine still feel uplifting? Or did its brightness feel tied mainly to the holiday season? As the countdown continues, emotional inflation will intensify, and January contrast will grow sharper. Citrine marks the transition from seasonal warmth to post-holiday clarity. Ranked 10th, Amethyst, the familiar stone that feels less special after the gifting season. Amethyst enters December with a powerful advantage. It is instantly recognizable. Its purple tones feel refined, calm, and emotionally balanced. And for many, it already carries a sense of trust before it is even unwrapped. That familiarity makes amethyst one of the most common holiday gemstones. It feels safe, appropriate, hard to get wrong. During the holidays, that reliability works in its favor. Amethyst pairs well with winter colors. It looks elegant under soft lighting. And it carries centuries of cultural association with clarity, reflection, and restraint. Qualities that feel aligned with the end of the year. But January changes the experience. Once the gifting season ends, amethyst's greatest strength, recognition, begins to work against it. Geologically, amethyst is a variety of quartz formed in geodes and volcanic cavities over long periods of time. High-quality specimens are beautiful, but commercially available amethyst is widespread and visually consistent. In December, that consistency feels reassuring. In January, it feels obvious. Without the emotional framing of a gift, amethyst often reveals itself immediately. The color is exactly as expected. The structure offers few surprises. The experience resolves quickly. This is where amethyst begins to feel emotionally overpriced. Not because it lacks beauty, but because it offers little discovery after the first impression. Holiday gifting rewards familiarity. Amethyst benefits from being a stone people already understand. It carries meaning without explanation. It signals thoughtfulness without risk. January shifts attention away from reassurance toward engagement. Once routine returns, viewers begin noticing how rarely amethyst changes across time, lighting, or context. Its purple remains steady. Its presence remains calm. Its character remains fixed. That stability is not a flaw, but in January it can feel static. This is especially true when amethyst is compared, quietly, to stones that reveal new details over time. Those stones invite return visits. Amethyst often does not. It says everything at once. This is why amethyst appears at this point in the countdown. Not because it disappoints, but because it resolves too quickly. The emotional arc closes almost immediately after the holidays end. For many, amethyst becomes a stone that is appreciated, but rarely revisited. That outcome does not diminish its historical role or cultural importance. It simply exposes how much of its holiday appeal depends on familiarity rather than depth. Amethyst is one of the most commonly gifted gemstones during the holidays. After the gifting season passed, did amethyst still invite attention, or did it feel fully understood from the start? As the countdown continues, the stones ahead will rely less on recognition and more on emotional intensity, creating sharper January contrasts. Amethyst marks the moment where familiarity stops working, and something else begins to matter more. Ranked 9th. Snowflake Obsidian, the winter stone, that loses its meaning once the season passes. Snowflake obsidian feels made for December. Its black surface, scattered with pale snow-like patterns, mirrors winter landscapes almost too perfectly. It looks intentional, seasonal, designed for cold months and quiet reflection. During the holidays, that visual alignment carries weight. Snowflake obsidian is not chosen for brilliance or rarity. It is chosen for atmosphere. Placed against winter decor and muted light, the stone feels symbolic, a contrast of darkness and stillness, marked by small moments of calm. In December, that symbolism feels natural. January changes the relationship. Once the season moves on, Snowflake obsidian's strongest feature, its winter identity, begins to narrow rather than expand its appeal. Geologically, Snowflake obsidian is volcanic glass, formed when lava cools rapidly. The white snowflakes are cristobalite inclusions, visually distinctive but common in material terms. In December, that detail rarely matters. The stone is experienced emotionally, not analytically. January removes the seasonal lens. Without winter context, Snowflake obsidian's patterns can feel less poetic and more literal. The contrast that once felt symbolic now feels fixed. The visual story does not evolve. Unlike stones that reveal new character over time, Snowflake obsidian presents itself fully at first glance. Its surface tells the entire story immediately. This is where it begins to feel emotionally overpriced, not because it promised too much, but because its meaning is tightly bound to a single season. Holiday gifting amplifies symbolism. Snowflake obsidian becomes a visual metaphor for calm within darkness, for stillness during chaos, for reflection at the end of the year. January moves forward. Once routines return and winter symbolism loses urgency, the stone often feels context-bound rather than adaptable. It pairs less naturally with everyday settings. Its seasonal identity becomes restrictive rather than expressive. This does not create disappointment, it creates distance. Snowflake obsidian is admired, but it is not revisited. Its role feels complete once the season that gave it meaning has passed. This is why Snowflake obsidian appears here in the countdown, not because it lacks beauty, but because its beauty depends heavily on timing. Stones that draw power from a specific season often struggle once that season ends. Snowflake obsidian makes that shift visible. Snowflake obsidian is closely associated with winter imagery and seasonal symbolism. After the holidays passed, did Snowflake obsidian still feel meaningful? Or did it feel tied almost entirely to the winter moment? As the countdown continues, the stones ahead will rely less on seasonal symbolism and more on emotional intensity, creating stronger January contrasts. Snowflake obsidian marks the point where timing begins to matter more than intention, and where January starts asking harder questions. Ranked 8th, white opal, commercial grade. The stone that looked magical under holiday lights. White opal often feels unforgettable in December. Under warm holiday lighting, its surface appears alive. Flashes of color flicker softly beneath a milky body tone. The effect feels subtle, almost intimate. Not loud, not dramatic, but quietly mesmerizing. In December, that glow feels special. White opal is frequently chosen during the holidays not for boldness, but for atmosphere. It suggests mystery, softness, and emotional nuance, qualities that resonate during reflective end-of-year moments. But January changes the experience. Once holiday lighting disappears, white opal's most compelling feature becomes less reliable. Geologically, opal is an amorphous form of silica, lacking the crystal structure found in most gemstones. In commercial-grade white opal, play of color is often subtle and highly dependent on lighting conditions. In December, this dependency is hidden. In January, it becomes visible. Without warm directional light, many white opals appear quieter. The flashes soften. The surface looks flatter. The color play that once felt magical becomes intermittent or difficult to see at all. This is not a flaw, it is a characteristic. But once seasonal lighting is removed, perception shifts quickly. Unlike stones that maintain presence across environments, white opal often requires specific conditions to perform. Without them, the experience feels diminished. Not because the stone changed, but because the illusion faded. This is where white opal begins to feel emotionally overpriced. not because it promised brilliance, but because it delivered its strongest impression only under a narrow set of circumstances. Holiday gifting amplifies this effect. Opal is often framed as ethereal, delicate, almost otherworldly. Under December lights, that framing feels accurate. January introduces neutrality. In everyday daylight, many viewers realize how much of the stone's appeal depended on atmosphere rather than depth. The color play does not evolve. The surface does not reveal new layers. The visual story remains fixed. That realization does not lead to regret. It leads to adjustment. White opal is appreciated, but differently than expected. It becomes a stone admired briefly rather than explored over time. This is why white opal appears here in the countdown, not because it lacks beauty, but because its beauty is conditional. Once the conditions change, the emotional impact fades faster than memory suggests. Stones that rely heavily on lighting often struggle once the season that flatters them ends. White opal makes that contrast impossible to ignore. White opal is often chosen for its soft glow and subtle color play. After the holidays ended, did white opal still feel as luminous, or did its beauty seem tied to the lighting it was first seen under? As the countdown continues, the stones ahead will depend less on illusion and more on emotional intensity, narrative weight, or scarcity perception. White opal simply marks the moment when light stops doing the work, and January starts seeing clearly. Ranked 7th. Rose quartz. The stone that feels meaningful until emotion runs out. Rose quartz enters the holiday season already carrying a powerful message. Its soft pink tones are universally associated with affection, care, and emotional closeness. It does not rely on rarity or brilliance. It relies on feeling. In December, that is enough. Rose quartz is one of the most common stones chosen for holiday gifts because it communicates intention instantly. It feels gentle, personal, safe. Placed inside a gift box, rose quartz often carries more emotional weight than visual impact. It signals thoughtfulness without requiring explanation. During the holidays, that directness feels appropriate. January changes the relationship. Once the emotional intensity of the season fades, rose quartz's message often feels fully delivered, with little left to unfold. Geologically, rose quartz is a variety of quartz, widely available and visually consistent. Its color rarely shifts. Its transparency offers limited variation. Its appearance remains steady across environments. In December, that consistency supports its role. In January, it becomes limiting. Unlike stones that reward prolonged attention, rose quartz communicates everything immediately. Its meaning is clear from the first glance. Its presence does not deepen over time. This is where rose quartz begins to feel emotionally overpriced, not because it lacks sincerity, but because its value is almost entirely concentrated in the moment it is given. Holiday gifting amplifies emotional symbolism. Rose quartz becomes a stand-in for care, reassurance, and connection during a time when those feelings are heightened. As a gift, it performs its function perfectly. January introduces distance. As routines return, viewers often notice how little the stone changes beyond its initial impression. The color remains soft. The surface remains familiar. The emotional response settles quickly. That settling does not create disappointment. It creates saturation. The stone has already said everything it needed to say. Rose quartz is not designed to surprise. It is designed to comfort, and comfort, once delivered, rarely demands repeated attention. This is why rose quartz appears here in the countdown. It does not mislead. It does not overpromise. It fulfills its purpose immediately and then steps back. For many, rose quartz becomes a stone that is appreciated emotionally, but rarely revisited visually or intellectually. That outcome does not reduce its cultural significance. It clarifies its role. Rose quartz is strongest at the moment of exchange, not the months that follow. Rose quartz is often chosen to express care and emotional connection during the holidays. After the season passed, did rose quartz still feel engaging? Or did its meaning feel complete once it was given? As the countdown continues, the stones ahead will rely less on pure emotion and more on narrative tension, scarcity perception, or surprise. Rose quartz marks the point where feeling alone is no longer enough, and January begins asking for more. Ranked 6th, Labradorite, the stone that impresses fast, then fades faster. Labradorite enters December with a visual advantage few stones can match. Under the right angle, its surface ignites. Blue, green, and gold flashes ripple beneath a dark base, creating an effect that feels sudden and dramatic. In holiday lighting, that flash feels almost cinematic. In December, Labradorite does not whisper, it performs. That performance is why it becomes a popular holiday gemstone. It feels mysterious, unexpected, visually striking without needing explanation. But January changes the experience. Once the holidays end, Labradorite's most powerful feature, its flash, begins to work against it. Geologically, Labradorite is a feldspar mineral known for labradorescence, an optical effect caused by light interference within its internal structure. The effect is real, natural, and visually impressive, but it is also conditional. In December, those conditions are easy to meet. Warm lighting, intentional angles, slow, deliberate viewing. January is less accommodating. Under everyday lighting and casual movement, Labradorite often appears darker and more opaque. The flashes arrive less often. The stone demands effort to reveal its best side. This is where Labradorite begins to feel emotionally overpriced, not because the flash disappears, but because maintaining it requires constant attention. Holiday gifting amplifies the initial impact. The first impression is strong, memorable, sometimes overwhelming. But once that moment passes, repetition sets in. The same flashes appear again and again. The same colors surface at familiar angles. The sense of discovery fades quickly. This is the core of flash fatigue. Unlike stones that reveal new details gradually, Labradorite delivers its most dramatic moment immediately. After that, the experience becomes predictable. January sharpens that realization. Without the patience or ceremony of the holiday season, many viewers notice how much of Labradorite's appeal depends on staging. Without careful lighting or positioning, the stone feels subdued, even dull. That contrast does not create regret. It creates recalibration. Labradorite is admired for what it can do, but revisited less often than expected. Its beauty is real, but finite. This is why Labradorite appears at this point in the countdown. It sits at the threshold between stones that feel emotionally complete and stones that begin to feel emotionally inflated. Labradorite promises spectacle, and it delivers quickly. But once that spectacle becomes familiar, January exposes how little remains beyond the flash. Labradorite is known for its dramatic flashes of color. After the holidays ended, did Labradorite still feel exciting, or did the flashes start to feel predictable over time? As the countdown continues, the stones ahead will rely less on visual tricks and more on narrative weight, scarcity perception, or emotional tension. Labradorite marks the moment where spectacle stops being enough. Ranked 5th, Amber the stone, whose story outlasts its substance. Amber arrives in December with an advantage few materials can rival. It does not need brilliance. It does not need rarity. It carries a story. Formed from ancient tree resin hardened over millions of years, amber is often presented as a time capsule, a material that once flowed, trapped life, and survived deep time. In December, that narrative feels powerful. Amber is frequently chosen as a holiday gemstone because it feels meaningful rather than ornamental. It suggests memory, continuity, a connection to something older than the moment itself. But January changes how that story is received. Once the holidays pass, attention begins to shift away from narrative and toward material reality. Unlike crystalline gemstones, amber is organic. It is lightweight, relatively soft, and structurally simple compared to stones formed under extreme pressure and heat. In December, those qualities feel secondary. The story does the work. In January, the balance reverses. Without seasonal storytelling, amber's physical presence can feel unexpectedly modest. Its surface lacks the visual depth of many mineral gemstones. Its color range, while warm and pleasant, rarely evolves with lighting or angle. This is where amber begins to feel emotionally overpriced, not because its story is false, but because its story carries more weight than its structure. Holiday gifting elevates narrative. Amber becomes a symbol of preservation, of history captured in material form, of time made tangible. As a gift, that symbolism lands strongly. January introduces scrutiny. When the narrative recedes, what remains is a material that feels lighter, both physically and visually, than memory suggests. The emotional impact fades faster than expected. That realization does not produce regret. It produces imbalance. The story still holds, but the object no longer carries it alone. Amber does not transform with time. It does not reveal hidden layers through prolonged attention. Its fascination peaks early, at the moment the story is told. This is why amber appears in the top 5. It marks a shift where meaning begins to outweigh material so heavily that January exposes the gap. Amber is not misleading. It is honest. But it asks the viewer to keep believing in the story long after the season that amplified it has passed. For some, that belief holds. For others, January introduces distance. Amber remains respected, but less compelling once narrative support is removed. Amber is often chosen for its history and symbolism rather than visual complexity. After the holidays ended, did amber still feel substantial? Or did its story begin to outweigh the stone itself? As the countdown continues, the stones ahead will push this tension further, where belief, scarcity perception, and expectation collide. Amber simply marks the point where story alone is no longer enough. Ranked 4th, turquoise. The handcrafted stone, often mistaken for rarity. Turquoise enters the holiday season carrying cultural weight. Its blue-green tones feel timeless, earthy, human. For centuries, turquoise has been associated with travel, protection, and craftsmanship, passed from hand to hand rather than locked away as a display object. In December, that heritage feels powerful. Turquoise is frequently chosen as a holiday gemstone because it feels meaningful without feeling fragile. It suggests authenticity, connection. Something made to be worn, not just admired, but January changes the conversation. Once the holidays pass, attention begins to shift away from story and toward material distinction. Geologically, turquoise is a hydrated copper phosphate mineral, relatively soft and porous in its natural state. To make it suitable for everyday jewelry, much of the turquoise used commercially is stabilized, treated to improve durability and appearance. This process is common, accepted, and often necessary. In December, that distinction rarely matters. The stone is experienced as an object of craft, of tradition, of cultural continuity. January introduces a different lens. Once the gifting context fades, many viewers begin separating craftsmanship from rarity, and the difference becomes clearer. Stabilized turquoise often appears visually consistent across pieces. Color patterns repeat. Surface texture feels uniform. Variation, once perceived as character, begins to look controlled. This is where turquoise starts to feel emotionally overpriced, not because it lacks history, but because its perceived value is often rooted in workmanship rather than geological scarcity. Holiday gifting amplifies appreciation for craft. Turquoise jewelry feels personal, human, intentionally imperfect. January emphasizes comparison. Once emotion recedes, the question quietly shifts. Is this stone rare or carefully finished? Is the value in the material itself or in the hands that shaped it? For many, that distinction arrives later than expected. This does not diminish turquoise's importance. It reframes it. Turquoise has always been a stone of culture rather than exclusivity, of identity rather than spectacle. But when holiday symbolism fades, the realization that craftsmanship, not scarcity, carries most of the value can make the stone feel different than it did in December. That difference does not create regret. It creates clarity. This is why turquoise appears in the top 5. It marks the moment where January begins separating how something was made from how rare it actually is. Turquoise remains respected, worn, valued. But its emotional inflation fades once the season that celebrated craftsmanship above all else passes. Turquoise is often admired for its craftsmanship and cultural history. After the holidays ended, did turquoise still feel rare, or did its value feel more connected to the work behind it than the stone itself? As the countdown continues, the remaining stones will push this tension further, where scarcity, belief, and expectation collide. Turquoise simply marks the point where craft stops being mistaken for rarity. Ranked third, low-grade Tanzanite, the rare stone that feels less rare once the story settles. Low-grade Tanzanite enters December carrying a powerful claim. It comes from a single location. It is finite by geography, and it is often introduced as a stone with a limited future. In December, that message feels urgent. Tanzanite is frequently positioned during the holidays as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a gemstone framed by scarcity rather than appearance. The story arrives first, the stone follows, but January changes how that story is processed. Once the holidays pass, attention begins to shift away from origin and toward observation. Geologically, Tanzanite is a blue-violet variety of zoisite found only in a small area near Mount Kilimanjaro. That geographic limitation is real, but it does not apply evenly across all grades. In December, that distinction is often blurred. Low-grade Tanzanite is visually softer, its color is lighter, its saturation less intense. Under holiday lighting, those differences are easy to overlook. January removes that cover. Without seasonal urgency, the stone's appearance begins to matter more than its backstory. The color no longer feels dramatic. The depth feels shallow. The visual presence resolves quickly. This is where low-grade Tanzanite begins to feel emotionally overpriced, not because the scarcity claim is false, but because scarcity alone does not guarantee impact. Holiday gifting amplifies narrative pressure. The idea of buy now before it's gone carries weight at the end of the year. As a gift, Tanzanite feels decisive, forward-thinking, significant. January introduces distance. With time and neutral lighting, many viewers begin noticing how closely low-grade Tanzanite resembles more common bluestones. The uniqueness that once felt urgent becomes harder to see. The promise of rarity feels abstract rather than visible. This does not create regret, it creates comparison. Once the story quiets, the stone must stand on its own. And for lower-grade material, that moment arrives quickly. Low-grade Tanzanite does not evolve over time. It does not reveal hidden complexity. Its strongest impression occurs at introduction, not through prolonged engagement. This is the collapse of the scarcity illusion. The stone remains legitimate. The origin remains unique. But the emotional weight shifts once the holiday framing dissolves. This is why low-grade Tanzanite appears at number 3. It represents the point where story-driven urgency begins to lose its power, and January demands visible distinction. High-grade Tanzanite survives that transition. Low-grade material often does not. The stone is not misleading. The timing is. Tanzanite is often presented as rare due to its single geographic source. After the holidays ended, did lower-grade Tanzanite still feel visually distinctive? Or did the idea of rarity matter more than what you could actually see? As the countdown approaches the final 2 stones, belief itself becomes the central force, where hype, expectation, and perception collide. Low-grade Tanzanite marks the moment when scarcity alone stops being enough. Ranked second, Moldavite, the stone that feels powerful until the hype wears off. Moldavite enters December already surrounded by intensity. It is introduced as cosmic, unusual, different from anything formed on Earth in the traditional sense. Created by a meteorite impact millions of years ago, Moldavite carries an origin story that feels immediate and dramatic, especially during the holiday season when meaning and mystery are elevated. In December, that story dominates. Moldavite is often framed as transformative, life-altering, something felt rather than simply worn. As a holiday gemstone, it rarely arrives quietly. But January changes the experience. Once the season of heightened emotion ends, Moldavite's strongest force, belief, begins to settle. Geologically, Moldavite is a type of tektite, formed from terrestrial material melted and ejected during a massive impact event. That origin is genuine, and the material itself is finite. But retail-grade Moldavite tells a narrower story. Lower-grade pieces often lack sharp sculptural detail. Surface texture appears smoothed. Color variation feels limited. In December, those qualities are overshadowed by expectation. In January, they become visible. This is where Moldavite begins to feel emotionally overpriced. Not because the stone is fake, but because the experience depends heavily on momentum. Holiday gifting amplifies intensity. Moldavite is rarely purchased casually. It is chosen with purpose, with anticipation. The first encounter often feels charged, memorable, sometimes overwhelming. But once that initial surge fades, repetition sets in, the stone does not change. The sensation does. January introduces distance. Without constant reinforcement, stories, community buzz, symbolic framing, retail-grade Moldavite often feels quieter than promised. The power once attributed to it becomes abstract rather than immediate. This does not create regret. It creates deflation. The stone remains unusual. The origin remains extraordinary. But the emotional peak passes faster than expected. This is the withdrawal phase. High-quality Moldavite, with strong texture and presence, can sustain attention beyond the hype. Retail-grade material often cannot. Once belief cools, the stone must stand on its physical qualities alone. And for many pieces, that moment arrives quickly. This is why Moldavite appears at number 2. It represents the point where collective excitement gives way to personal experience, and January exposes the gap. The stone is not dishonest. The environment amplified it. When that environment disappears, perception recalibrates. Moldavite is often surrounded by intense stories and expectations. After the holidays ended, did Moldavite still feel as powerful? Or did the hype fade faster than the stone itself? Only one stone remains, and unlike Moldavite, it does not rely on hype, scarcity claims, or dramatic origin stories. It relies on something much quieter. In first place, clear quartz, the stone that carries meaning, but almost never scarcity. Clear quartz enters the holiday season quietly. It does not sparkle aggressively. It does not signal luxury. It does not promise rarity. And yet, it is one of the most commonly gifted stones during the holidays. Clear quartz is chosen not for what it is, but for what people believe it represents: clarity, balance, renewal. In December, those ideas carry weight. Clear quartz often appears as a symbolic gift, something meant to mark a transition, a reset, or a new beginning. It feels intentional, thoughtful, emotionally appropriate at the end of the year. But January changes the relationship completely. Once the season of symbolism passes, clear quartz's defining characteristic becomes unavoidable. It is everywhere. Geologically, clear quartz is one of the most abundant minerals on Earth. It forms in countless environments, across continents, in enormous quantities. Its clarity is natural, but not uncommon. In December, that fact rarely matters. The stone is experienced as a vessel for meaning. January removes the ceremony. Without holiday framing, clear quartz often reveals how little of its value is tied to material distinction. Its appearance remains consistent. Its structure offers few surprises. Its presence feels resolved almost immediately. This is where clear quartz begins to feel emotionally overpriced. Not because it lacks purpose, but because its purpose is entirely symbolic. Holiday gifting amplifies intention. Clear quartz becomes a stand-in for hope, for alignment, for starting over. As a gift, it performs that role perfectly. January introduces reflection. Once emotion settles, attention shifts towards substance, and clear quartz offers almost nothing new to discover beyond its initial message. The stone does not transform with time. It does not reveal hidden depth through prolonged observation. Its experience peaks at the moment it is given. That realization does not create disappointment, it creates clarity. Clear quartz was never meant to impress through rarity. It was meant to be understood. And when understanding arrives quickly, engagement often ends just as fast. This is why clear quartz stands at number 1. It represents the purest example of a stone whose perceived value rises dramatically during the holidays and settles just as quickly once January resets perspective. Clear quartz is not misleading, it is honest. Its meaning is real. Its symbolism is valid. But once the season that amplifies meaning fades, what remains is a stone that asks very little and offers nothing unexpected in return. Clear quartz is one of the most symbolic gemstones ever gifted. After the holidays ended, did clear quartz still feel meaningful? Or did its message feel complete the moment it was received? Some gemstones are bought for rarity, some for beauty, and some for the moment they represent. January doesn't erase that meaning. It simply shows what was carrying the weight all along.